About the Berlin Wall. Berlin Wall was a concrete barrier wall built by the German Democratic Republic East Germany that separated West Berlin from East Berlin and other East German areas, making West Berlin an enclave. This wall began to be built on August 13, 1961. This boundary wall also coincided with the construction of guard towers that were built along this wall, and the establishment of a restricted area, filled with anti-vehicle mines. The Eastern Bloc stated that the wall was built to protect its citizens from fascist elements that could trigger large movements, so that they could form a communist government in East Germany. However, in practice, it turned out that the wall was used to prevent the greater flight of East Berlin residents to West Berlin, which was in West Germany. By the East German authorities, the Berlin Wall was said to be an anti-fascist protection wall, German Antifaschistischer Schutzwall, which stated that the West German state had not been completely denazified. The West German city government sometimes referred to the Berlin Wall as the Wall of Shame, a term coined by Mayor Willy Brandt, in condemnation of its restrictions on freedom of movement. Along with the inter-German wall that separated East and West Germany, the two walls became symbols of the Iron Curtain that separated Western Europe from the Eastern Bloc during the Cold War. Before the wall was built, some 3.5 million East Germans had migrated and defected to the West, partly by crossing the East German-West German border, and then to other Western European countries. Between 1961 and 1989, the wall prevented that. In the span of approximately 30 years, there were approximately 5,000 people who attempted to escape, with an estimated 100 to 200 people being shot dead. In 1989, there was a radical political change in the Eastern Bloc, related to the liberalization of the authority system in the Eastern Bloc and also the decreasing influence of the Soviet Union in countries such as Poland and Hungary. After several weeks of civil unrest, the East German government announced on November 9, 1989 that East Germans could travel to West Germany and West Berlin. Thus, crowds of East Germans crossed and climbed the wall, followed by West Germans on the other side to celebrate the atmosphere of freedom. A few weeks later, public euphoria and souvenir hunters finally cracked parts of the wall. Later, most of the wall was destroyed by the government using heavy equipment. The fall of the Berlin Wall paved the way for German reunification, October 3, 1990. History of the Berlin Wall. Post-World War II Germany. After the end of World War II in Europe, what remained of the western part of the Oder-Neisse line was divided into 4 occupied territories as a result of the Potsdam Agreement, controlled by the United States, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union respectively. The capital, Berlin, as the center of control, was also divided into 4 territories even though the city itself was located deep within Soviet control. For about 2 years, there was a political shift between the Soviets and the other Allied members. This happened because the Soviets refused to agree to a plan for the reconstruction of post-war Germany. Britain, France, the United States, and the Benelux countries then met to merge the non-Soviet areas into one area for reconstruction and agreed to an expansion of the Marshall Plan. The Eastern Bloc and the Berlin Blockade. After the end of World War II, Soviet Union leader Joseph Stalin headed a coalition of several countries that were part of the Eastern Bloc, including Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia, including the Soviet-controlled German territories. In early 1945, Stalin told the German communist leaders to remove Britain from their occupation zone, plus the United States would withdraw its troops within a year or two, so that there would be no obstacles to the formation of a unified German communist state. The main task of running a communist party in the Soviet region was to carry out Soviet orders to administrative authorities, the results of which would later be seen in the policies issued by the region. Thus, industries and much property in East Germany were immediately nationalized. A contrasting political process took place in West Germany, controlled by Britain, France, and the United States, where the president and prime minister were elected by parliament. If the final statement or decision reported is not in accordance with what is supposed to be, then the person carrying out this mission can be imprisoned, tortured, or even killed. In 1948, due to the lack of agreement on reconstruction and a new German currency, Stalin introduced the Berlin blockade to prevent the entry of food, materials, and other necessities into West Berlin. The United States, Britain, France, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and several other countries immediately sent food aid and other supplies to Berlin in what was called the Berlin Airlift. The Soviets then launched a public campaign criticizing Western policies. The Communists also tried to undermine the 1948 elections, but they were ultimately defeated, plus 300,000 West Berliners protesting against the blocking of international aid to them. In May 1949, Stalin finally lifted the blockade and allowed the transport of goods and other necessities into West Berlin. The German Democratic Republic East Germany was declared on October 7, 1949. By secret agreement, the Soviet Foreign Ministry agreed to East German administrative authority, but not autonomy. The Soviet Union itself retained full penetration and control of the East German military, secret police, and administration. East Germany differed from West Germany, the Federal Republic of Germany, which had developed into a capitalist state with a Western culture, a social market economy, soziale Marktwirtschaft in German, and a parliamentary democratic government. The extraordinary economic growth of the 1950s gave rise to an economic miracle, Wirtschaftswunder. With the West German economy continuing to grow and the standard of living improving, many East Germans wanted to emigrate to West Germany. Construction of the Berlin Wall. The wall was built on August 13, 1961 by the Communist government of East Germany under the leadership of Walter Ulbricht because West Berlin was a hole in their country. Between 1949 and 1961, more than 2 million East Germans fled through Berlin. This made the East German economy weak, because most of the young people fled. So secretly and suddenly the wall was built. The Berlin Wall and the Cold War. The Berlin Wall, which encircled West Berlin and cut the city right in the middle, became the most famous symbol of the Cold War. Many Western dignitaries, especially the presidents of the United States, visited the wall to condemn it. President John F. Kennedy in 1963 came and gave a speech on the side of the wall with his famous sentence, "Ich bin ein Berliner." Then 20 years later, in 1983, President Ronald Reagan also gave a speech here and condemned the Soviet Union, which he called an evil empire, or an evil empire. But in 1989, on the anniversary of the German Democratic Republic, or East Germany, the leader of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, also visited the Berlin Wall and said to the leader of East Germany, Erich Honecker, that he who comes late will be punished by life. Escape through the Berlin Wall. During the Berlin Wall, there were about 5,000 people who managed to escape. The number of people who died trying to escape is still debated. According to Alexandra Hildebrandt, director of the Checkpoint Charlie Museum, the estimated number of people who died was more than 200. A historical group at the Center for Contemporary Historical Research ZZF in Potsdam confirmed that there were 136 people killed. Previously, the official figure was 98 people killed. A dramatic incident was once carried out by Wolfgang Engels, a 19-year-old civil servant of the East German National People's Army in 1963. At that time, Engels stole an armored vehicle from a military base and crashed it into the Berlin Wall. He was then shot by the wall guards and injured. However, the police on the West German side, assisted by several local residents, managed to save Engels. The fall of the Berlin Wall. After allowing loopholes for its citizens to cross the border in the summer, Hungary finally effectively removed its physical border with Austria on August 19, 1989. In September, more than 13,000 East Germans fled to Austria via Hungary. This led to a series of events. The Hungarians prevented more East Germans from crossing the border, turning them back to Budapest. These East Germans filled the West German embassy and refused to return to East Germany. The East German government responded by blocking all travel to Hungary, but allowing those who wanted to return to East Germany. On this occasion, the East German authorities allowed them to leave, as long as their trains passed through East Germany. This led to massive demonstrations in East Germany itself. See Monday demonstrations in East Germany. The East German leader, Erich Honecker, resigned on October 18, 1989, and was replaced a few days later by Egon Krenz. Honecker had predicted that the wall would last another 50 or 100 years, if the conditions in the country did not change. Protests broke out across East Germany in September 1989. At first, the protesters wanted to leave for the west, shouting "Wir wollen raus," "We are leaving." But then the protesters started shouting "Wir bleiben hier," "We are staying here." Thus, this was the beginning of what East Germans called the Peaceful Revolution in late 1989. The protests grew in size in early November. The protests reached their peak on November 4, when nearly 500,000 people gathered at the Alexanderplatz demonstration. Henslin, 07. Meanwhile, the number of refugees leaving East Germany for West Germany increased, and they found a new way out of East Germany, namely through Hungary via Czechoslovakia or via the West German embassy in Prague, which was permitted by the new Krenz government, and with the agreement of the Czechoslovak communist government. In order not to complicate the situation further, the Politburo led by Krenz finally allowed the refugees to leave directly through the border gates between East Germany and West Germany, including West Berlin on November 9, 1989. The destruction of the Berlin Wall. The date when the wall began to be demolished was November 9, 1989, but it was not immediately demolished. That afternoon and for several weeks afterward, people came with sledgehammers and the like to destroy sections of the wall and also create several unofficial gaps in the border. These people were called Mauerspekt wall pickers. The East German regime again announced that it would open 10 new border crossings, including at historic sites such as Potsdamer Platz, Gleianicker Brücke, and Bernauer Straße. Crowds from both sides waited for hours, cheering as bulldozers demolished the wall. New border crossings continued to be opened throughout 1990, including at the Brandenburg Gate on December 22, 1989. West Germans and West Berliners were allowed to enter East Germany without a visa starting December 23, 1989. Until that date, they were only allowed to enter with various conditions and were required to make an application for a visa. In addition, they were required to pay a minimum of 25 DM per day. So, in fact, on November 9 and December 23, East Germans were freer than West Germans. Television reports of large numbers of civilians destroying large sections of the wall on November 9 led many people abroad to believe that the wall would soon be demolished. In fact, the wall remained guarded for several days afterward, although the security was much less intense. In the first month, the East German military attempted to repair the wall that had been destroyed by the wall pickers. Over time, this was stopped, and the guards became more tolerant of the destruction of the wall and the evacuation of civilians through the holes. On January 13, 1990, the wall was officially demolished by the East German military, starting at Bernauer Straße. The demolition of the wall continued after German reunification, and was finally completed in November 1991. Only a few sections of the wall and towers remained, as memorials. The fall of the Berlin Wall marked the beginning of German reunification, which was signed on October 3, 1990. Note, the Berlin Wall is one of the most iconic tourist attractions in Germany. The period from 1961 to 1989 saw the division of Germany into two parts, West Germany and East Germany, with the Berlin Wall standing as a symbol of separation. Today, only a small part of the Berlin Wall remains to be seen. Most of the concrete structure has been torn down, but the remaining fragments are still an important part of the city. There is a special Berlin Wall path that offers 14 routes for cyclists and pedestrians. You can feel a different atmosphere of history when you are in the area here.